All right, the debate. Is it car or is it driver? I think it was clear this weekend if Lewis Hamilton was out of that car and put into a Williams and George Russell was put into a Mercedes, as we saw this weekend, that it isn't drive. You have to have skill to drive a Formula One car. I'll give you that.
Yes.
But is it 100% driver? I think it's maybe 30% driver, 70% car. Give me a different ratio. I'll fight you to it. I'll die on that hill because clearly a talented driver in Lewis Hamilton, we all know our feelings about Lewis Hamilton, in my personal opinion, on this show. But now we clearly saw that this was a car in Mercedes that is clearly the best car out there because a guy from Williams, you look at Williams and like, no, these drivers are horrible. No. It's the car that's horrible.
Yep.
So in Formula One, for me, it's 30% driver, 70% car. What's your take on it?
Well, if you go back to an interview in 2017 with Daniel Ricciardo, he broke it down and he said, I think it's 75% car and 25% driver. Okay. And he said that he was not knocking anybody because you have to have the skill to drive.
Yeah, at least you have to have the concentration to drive these cars.
But if you look at it and break it down, with Mercedes winning championship after championship after championship, Lewis Hamilton is out because of COVID. George Russell, who is at the top of Mercedes' list, who is a very good driver, they said, okay, we're going to put George Russell in the car.
Right.
The first two practice sessions of the weekend, he was the fastest. The fastest.
You want to know his average finish in the 16 races that we have run this season? George Russell finished 9th this weekend. Can you guess what his average finish was in those 16 races?
It's probably going to be pretty high. I mean, he was finishing towards the back a lot of the time.
15.7 with 4 DNFs.
Wow.
Let me tell you something, Preston. If anything, if this weekend showed me anything, that it isn't the car or it isn't the driver, it's all about the car.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I could hop into a Mercedes AMG Petronas Silver Arrow and be competitive on the Formula One circuit. I feel like it's hit the gas, turn the car.
Yeah.
You might say differently of me, but if George Russell could go from an average finish of 15th, lead how many laps?
50. Let me look at it again. 59.
Led 59 laps. Has he ever led a lap in Formula One?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of either.
So actually, that's funny because he led more laps this year than anybody else other than Hamilton or Bottas. That's saying a lot.
No, that's saying this. It's Ricardo gave it 75-25 for the car. I'm giving it 30 for the driver, 70 for the car. Mm-hmm. Only because I feel like, you're going to need to be you're going to need to be fit to drive those cars. You're going to need the concentration. You're going to need to know the knowledge and the steering wheel and all that stuff. To me, it's a little more than that. Ricardo's a pro, so he can give it that 25-75 ratio. But I feel like, I mean, just based on what I saw, I was really expecting George Russell to be on top of that podium and us hear the same national anthem, and it's both British and German, but just not Lewis Hamilton in the picture.
Yeah, it was just bad luck.
Yeah, well, and we talked about that, but at the same time, clearly it shows to me that it isn't about the driver in Formula One, it's about the car.
Well,
the one driving the car isn't really, it's just making sure it doesn't go into the barrier.
Right. So I also kind of look back at like this. So when they were interviewing Lawrence Stroll after the race, and he talked about how that team has come so far with the amount of guys that they had to begin with. I think he said they had like between 200 and 400 employees or something like that. He said that's just half of what a big F1 team has. You're talking hundreds of people.
Are you talking about Williams?
No. Lawrence Stroll with Racing Point was talking about how far that team has come when they were, they used to be Force India, and they only had between 200 to 400 employees. And he said that's only just half of what a major F1 team has. That goes to show you the amount of people that work on every little thing that there is to go into that car. That car, in Formula One, it's more of the engineers that deserve more of the credit than the driver.
100%. Yet Lewis Hamilton thinks he's the best daggum driver in the world when George Russell, a guy from Williams, almost showed him up. And, I give it to them. Yeah, they made a bad pit call, and it takes a team effort to win. But to right there, that shows me Lewis Hamilton is not the best driver in the world. If George Russell can step up and take his spot and dominate the race, didn't win the race, which that's all that matters. Lewis Hamilton's not the best driver in the world. And if Formula One fans want to say something, email us at inthemarbles@hotmail.com because you won't win that debate.
And so, also, with Bottas being a Mercedes, if he's not a Mercedes, how well do you think he does? Because I think also that
he did well in Williams. I'll give him that. He did well in Williams, and that's where I first noticed him. Because in Australia, I believe it was 2015 when he first started. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But he got into the wall there in Australia and like punctured a tire and came back and finished fifth. It's like, man, this guy needs to go to Ferrari. But no. Right now, I don't care who it is. Put Vettel in that seat, and Vettel will win. Put George Russell in that seat, and George Russell is in a winning car. It isn't about the driver in Formula One. The driver is more of a figurehead. Hey, are you well polished? Hey, can you talk to sponsors? Hey, do you have a good social media presence? Hey, do you have this? Who cares? You could pull Joe Smo off the street, throw him in the car. I dare say you could throw B.J. McLeod into that car and he would win.
You think so?
Yeah, because it isn't about the driver. It's 30% driver. It is 30% driver, 70% car. And if you got the car, who is the stallion and who is the stud of the field, you're not going to beat that car.
So I have an interesting tweet here that I found from Andy Lally. Remember Andy Lally?
Yeah, I remember. Refresh everybody's mind because I need a refresher too. Andy Lally, because that name does sound familiar.
He was a NASCAR driver. Popular, yeah. Andy Lally. I think it used to be the 96 car, I think, at one point. I can't quite remember. It was some car in the high 90s that he used to drive. It wasn't the best. It wasn't the greatest team out there. So, also an IMSA driver. Andy Lally. His tweet, and Maples had texted me this, and he had talked about it too. I think this is where he got the idea. Andy Lally's tweet reads, "Hear me out. Third car for Mercedes in 2021. Every full-time driver gets one race with it. I watched this to check out the Russell variable. Probably the only way I'm going to watch another F1 race after we go back to the normal butt kicking." I use butt instead of the other word. The normal butt kicking by the same 1.5 drivers.
Ooh. And I think this is why people look at Formula One like it is all about the car. It isn't about the drivers. Okay, or instead of that, that setting on F1 2020 where you could say everybody's equal? Mm-hmm. Do that. Make everybody equal. And I know that's what the agreement's supposed to be coming up here soon.
Yeah, that's usually I think
the
F2
Concord agreement, right?
Yeah, the Concord agreement with the spending cap, but I think F2 is kind of like, I know that in the game itself, F2 is completely across the board equal in terms of car.
Right.
So I don't know how it equals out into real life, but I found this tweet kind of interesting, and somebody replied to him and said, "Do you not watch because Hamilton is dominant?" And Andy Lally says, "I don't watch because it's a mainly one-car race."
Yes, and we've brought this up on the show many times. And I forget what episode I said it on, but if you go back and listen to it, it's on there. I know it is. I asked, if you throw Lewis Hamilton into a Williams and throw a Williams driver into the Mercedes, who wins? Mm-hmm. I said the one in the Mercedes will win. And that was evident this weekend at Abu Dhabi. Who cares? Lewis Hamilton, in my opinion, you put him into a Williams, he is not a 7-time champion.
No, he's not.
And so, does that make him the best driver in the world? To me, Matt Beamer in the marbles, no, it does not. Lewis Hamilton is not a good driver. It is the car that deserves it. It should be a constructor's championship and take the driver's championship out the window because, to me, no, Lewis Hamilton is not the best driver in the world. Prove me wrong.
Okay. All right.
And I'm leaving it at that. That is my debate. And I think I won that debate because we clearly saw on worldwide TV, on ESPN, George Russell be just as dominant as Lewis Hamilton.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whereas George Russell's average finish up to this race was 15th.
I think you make a pretty good point.
Lewis Hamilton is not the best driver in the world.
I think he's a good driver, but I won't say that if he was not in a Mercedes, he would not be.
If he was in the Williams, he would be laughed off the track. I guarantee you. Just like Williams is.
If Lewis Hamilton was not in a Mercedes, Max Verstappen has. I think Max Verstappen has at least like 4 titles in the last, the 7-year run that the Mercedes has been on in a row now.
Lewis Hamilton is not the best driver in the world. Mercedes is the best racing car in the world.
Yes, they are.
And that is my debate. And if you disagree with me, in the marbles.net, drop us a message, and I guarantee you we'll get back to you.
I think we could hear some feedback.
I think we could hear some feedback on that. And we have yet to get feedback about anything, but I feel like we could get feedback on this one. Prove me wrong. Lewis Hamilton is not the best driver in the world. And I will even tag him in that post. Lewis Hamilton, you are obviously not the best driver in the world if George Russell, a Williams driver, could get in there and do your job.
All right.
Now, I'll tell you this. If George Russell started 15th and then went throughout the course of the race and was just not doing well and not running as well as expected, okay, I'll give a little more credit to Lewis Hamilton. I would have given credit where credit's due. But George Russell, a Williams driver, got into your car, Lewis Hamilton, and did your job just as well.
I mean, like I said, I didn't want to be shocked when the weekend had started, but when George Russell appeared at the top of FP1 on Friday, I was clearly like, okay, this looks about right. Mercedes has a fast car, and George Russell's good at the same time. He can drive, he can wheel a car, obviously, just like Lewis Hamilton can. And then FP2 came, and he was right at the top again. And I was like, wow, shocker. Mercedes is at the top again.
If he would have won that race, I would have sung his praises and said, I knew Lewis Hamilton wasn't that good.
Yeah.
Just like the debate is. But that was our debate segment. If you guys disagree with us or agree with us, let us know, whether on social media or in the marbles.net. Drop us a message. We'd really appreciate that. And now we're going to get into our final thoughts. Hey, race fans, want more In the Marbles content? Make sure to subscribe below and check out our videos over here.